Saturday came bright and windless, the kind of day when all of Clearwater found its way to town. Eliza Monroe rode beside Nathaniel Garrett in the wagon, a basket of eggs and mended shirts at her feet. She wore a freshly pressed calico dress, plain but neat, and her hair, tied with a blue ribbon, caught the sunlight like thread spun from corn silk. They hadn't been to town together before. Eliza's hand stayed folded in her lap, her face calm, but her pulse beat quick under her collar. Nathaniel noticed, though he said nothing. The general store buzzed with voices and creaking floorboards. When they stepped inside, conversation dropped to a hush sharp enough to hear the door hinge sigh. Behind the counter, Mr. Webb, the storekeeper, cleared his throat but didn't greet them. At the far end, Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, crisp in lace and judgment, let her words fall like stones. "Well," she said loudly, "looks like Garrett finally brought the girl he bought." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Eliza's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. Nathaniel's voice came low, steady. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, "you watch that tongue." Her smile was sweet poison. "I only speak what everyone knows." Nathaniel took one step closer, his boots thudding like punctuation. "My wife manages my home, raises my sons, and keeps this ranch running. She reads Latin, balances accounts better than I ever could, and delivered a breech calf last week that'd be dead under lesser hands. You tell me, ma'am, what do you do besides ruin decent mornings?" The store went still as a graveyard. Even Mr. Webb froze mid-measure of flour. Eliza's heart hammered, but she said nothing. Her dignity spoke louder than any defense could. Mrs. Henderson's mouth opened, then shut again. Nathaniel laid coins on the counter, took the sack of sugar she'd come to buy, and turned to Eliza. "Ready to go home?" he asked. She nodded, her voice soft but sure. "Home sounds good." When they stepped outside, the whispering began again, only different this time. Some nodded as they passed. A few smiled, small and respectful. Eliza lifted her chin to the sunlight, the warmth on her face feeling like something she'd earned. Autumn came early that year. Morning frost glazed the pasture fences, and the sound of hammer and saw echoed from the barn, where repairs never seemed to end. Eliza Garrett, for by now she'd earned the name in every way but ceremony, had settled into the rhythm of ranch life like she'd been born to it. She rose before dawn, brewed coffee before Nathaniel came down, and always left enough heat in the stove for the boys' breakfasts. When the roof leaked after the first cold rain, she climbed the ladder herself, dress hem pinned, hammer in hand. By winter, no one in Clearwater doubted she could outwork half the men in the county. But it wasn't just labor that marked her worth. She taught James his sums and Thomas his letters well enough that even the schoolteacher commented. She showed William how to plant winter greens, saying, "You feed the soil like you'd feed a friend." When Nathaniel worried over ledgers, she stayed up beside him, candlelight catching the gold in her hair. "You're paying too much for feed," she said, tracing the columns. "They're adding 10% that isn't yours to lose." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll stop losing." The ranch began to prosper. Debt fell away like old bark from a tree. By the time the snow melted, they'd saved near $40, almost the sum her father once took for her. Nathaniel didn't mention it, but he wrote the number carefully in the margins of his ledger, as if to mark the turning of something sacred. That spring, a mare foaled early and struggled. Eliza knelt in the straw, sleeves rolled, hands steady as she guided the slick, trembling newborn into the world. When the creature let out its first cry, Nathaniel swore he'd never seen anything so near to grace. "You've saved us again," he said, voice thick. Eliza brushed sweat from her brow. "Just did what was needed." That night, over supper, the boys argued softly about names for the foal. Thomas suggested Fortune. Eliza smiled at that. Seems fitting. We've all found a bit of it. And Nathaniel, watching her laugh with the children, realized that the ranch no longer belonged to him alone. It belonged to them, to all of them, and most of all to the woman who'd turned work into love and hardship into home. Summer returned soft and golden over the plains. The harvest had come early, the fields heavy with promise, and the Garrett ranch stood quiet in the dusk, every fence mended, every roof sound. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Garrett felt the peace of a man whose burdens no longer outweighed his blessings. That evening, he found Eliza sitting on the porch rail, hands folded loosely in her lap. The day's heat still lingered, and the scent of cut hay floated on the breeze. The boys had gone to bed. The house glowed behind her with lamplight, and the slow rhythm of a family settling. "I never thanked you," Nathaniel said. She turned, half smiling. "For what?" "For everything." For this, he gestured toward the home they'd built from silence and work. Her voice was quiet. "You gave me a place to stand. I just learned how to fill it." He took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair, searching for words he'd never been good at. "I brought you here for help," he said, "but you've become more." Eliza looked at him steadily. "I came here as property. You made me feel human again." The words hung in the air like a prayer neither dared claim. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Sarah would have liked you." Eliza nodded gently. "I hope so. She was kind," he said, "but she was never strong like you." Eliza's eyes softened. "Maybe she didn't have to be. Maybe that was your lesson for me." A long silence settled between them, comfortable now instead of uncertain. Fireflies drifted above the grass. Somewhere in the dark, the chestnut mare stamped softly in her stall. Then Nathaniel spoke again, voice lower. "Eliza, I don't know how to do this right, but I know what I want. Not as a debt, as a choice." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "May I court you, properly?" Eliza's eyes glimmered in the lantern glow. "You're asking my permission?" He nodded. "It's the only way that matters." Her lips trembled into a smile. "Then yes. Yes, you may." Nathaniel reached out, his rough hand brushing hers, and in that still moment, she leaned toward him. The kiss they shared was soft and sure, two lives meeting in quiet agreement, nothing hurried, nothing owed. When they drew apart, the porch light flickered, and the stars above seemed to shimmer brighter for it. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Love, real and earned, had found its place. 18 months passed. The Garrett ranch had weathered 2 winters and come out stronger than ever. The barn was freshly painted, fences straight, and laughter had become part of the landscape. Eliza Garrett moved through her days with quiet confidence. Wife, mother-to-be, and the heart of everything that grew under that Wyoming sky. On a late summer afternoon, as she was measuring fabric on the porch, a shadow fell across the yard. A horse stumbled into view, rider swaying, hat low, dust clinging to every ragged thread. John Monroe, her father, had returned. He reined up at the gate and squinted toward the house. "Eliza," he slurred, "there's my girl." The smell of whiskey carried even from where she stood. Eliza's hands froze on the cloth, the years between them collapsing into a single heartbeat of disbelief. Nathaniel stepped out beside her, jaw tightening. "Can I help you?" John spat in the dirt. "Help yourself, more like. You got a good deal out of me. That girl's worth 10 horses now, from what I hear. I figure I'm owed a share." The boys had gathered near the porch steps, silent and watchful. Eliza drew a slow breath and moved down toward the yard, her posture steady, her voice even. "You sold me, Father. For a horse. And you spent that horse's life in whiskey. John's eyes narrowed. You can't talk to me that way. I'm your blood. No, she said, her tone like iron wrapped in grace. You're my past. That's all. He tried to push past Nathaniel, but Thomas, the eldest son now grown tall, stepped forward, blocking him. You best leave, mister. For a flicker of a second, the drunk man saw what he'd thrown away, a family whole and proud without him. Eliza looked at him. No hate, no pity, just finality. You gave me away like I was worthless, she said softly. He gave me a life worth living. We're done here. John Monroe's face twisted, caught somewhere between anger and shame. Then he turned his horse, wobbling in the saddle. Nathaniel said nothing, only stood with his hand resting lightly on Eliza's shoulder. The boys watched until the figure disappeared over the ridge. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Nathaniel murmured, You all right? Eliza nodded, eyes bright but steady. Yes, for the first time I truly am. Spring returned to Clearwater, gentle and green, washing the land clean of the year before. The Garrett Ranch, once a quiet mark on the horizon, now thrived like a living promise. Fields tilled, fences straight, and laughter spilling from the open windows. When the church bell rang that Sunday, folks turned to see Nathaniel and Eliza Garrett step down from their wagon. It had been 6 months since they'd wed, simple vows spoken at the small church on the hill, and the town hadn't stopped talking since. But the whispers that once carried judgment had softened into respect. Eliza wore a pale blue dress she'd sewn herself, the same shade as Wyoming sky after rain. Nathaniel walked beside her, hand steady at the small of her back, pride visible but quiet. The boys followed in clean shirts, hair combed, boots polished near to ruin. Inside, the congregation rose with the hymn. Afterward, the churchyard filled with handshakes and Sunday chatter. Mrs. Henderson approached first, her lace parasol trembling ever so slightly. Mrs. Garrett, she said, her voice caught between pride and apology. I was wrong about you. Eliza smiled softly. Most of us are, until we learn better. A pause. Then Mrs. Henderson's face relaxed, and she reached out her hand. Eliza took it. We all deserve second chances, she said. The gesture broke whatever frost lingered between them. Soon others came, Mr. Webb from the store, a rancher's wife who once looked away, even the town elder. The Garrett Ranch is the finest in 3 counties, the elder said. And that's down to both of you. Nathaniel tipped his hat. Couldn't have done it without her. Children tugged at Eliza's skirts, begging for stories. She'd begun teaching Sunday lessons after service, gathering the town's little ones under the cottonwoods for reading and hymns. When she knelt among them, sunlight struck the gold band on her hand, and her rounded belly beneath the folds of her dress. Mrs. Henderson watched, eyes soft now instead of sharp. She's teaching half the county's children, she murmured, and I thought she'd brought shame. No, Mr. Webb said quietly. She brought dignity. As the Garrett family left the churchyard, the crowd parted easily to let them pass. No one whispered anymore. Heads bowed slightly in greeting. Smiles followed in their wake. By the wagon, Nathaniel helped Eliza up, pausing just long enough to meet her eyes. Reckon the town's changed its mind, he said. Eliza shook her head. No, she answered, smiling. They just finally saw what was true all along. 5 years later, the sun rose over a changed Wyoming. Where the wind once carried the cry of loneliness, it now echoed with laughter, hammer blows, and the soft chorus of cattle lowing across the valley. The Garrett Ranch had become one of the most prosperous in 3 counties. The barn stood new and tall, a second house under construction for the growing family. The garden that Eliza planted in her first year now burst with vegetables and flowers alike, a riot of color against the golden earth. On the porch, Eliza Garrett, 24, stood watching her children at play. Thomas, 17, was helping Nathaniel stack fence posts. James, 14, knelt beside his younger sister, teaching her letters. William, 11, tried to steady the baby in his arms, laughing as she reached for his hair. Their mother's voice drifted across the yard, soft but sure. "Careful with your sister, Will. She's more trouble than she looks." Nathaniel looked up from his work, hat pushed back, eyes warm as he watched his wife. He still called her Miss Eliza sometimes, out of habit and fondness. "You've turned this place into a kingdom," he said. She smiled. "Only the kind built with calluses and prayer." A rider passed the gate, tipping his hat respectfully. Every soul in the valley knew her name now, not as the girl who'd been sold, but as the woman who'd made something holy from what began in shame. Inside, above the hearth, hung a framed photograph taken by a traveling photographer the year before. Nathaniel, Eliza, the boys, and their 2 daughters, all standing proud in front of the ranch house. And in the barn, on a wooden beam above the stall, hung the old saddle of the chestnut mare, the horse her father once traded her for. On the leather, carved carefully by Nathaniel's hand, were the words, "The horse that brought me everything, 1883. That evening after supper, Eliza stood on the porch once more, the sky deep with orange and violet. The children's laughter carried from inside. Nathaniel joined her, setting his arm around her shoulders. "You ever think about that day?" he asked. She nodded. "Sometimes. But not with pain anymore. What he traded away gave us everything." Nathaniel's hand tightened gently around hers. "He thought you were worth a horse," he said. "But you were worth all the gold in California." Eliza smiled, her eyes bright with the reflection of the setting sun. "Worth isn't what you're given," she said softly. "It's what you build." The wind shifted through the fields, stirring the grass like water. Behind them, the ranch lights glowed warm against the coming dark, proof of a love, a home, and a life fully earned.